They say darkness has many faces, but I knew only one. The stone walls of the East Tower had been my world for 10 years, cold and gray as the winters that swept through the Southern Kingdom. I was 16 now, though sometimes I felt ancient, worn down by the weight of solitude and shame. My name is Seraphina, though few remember it. Most call me the Veiled One, the Cursed Girl, the shame of House Aldrich. The servants whisper when they think I cannot hear, their words carrying up the spiral stairs like smoke. They speak of my marks, the silver patterns that spread across the left side of my face like stars frozen in flesh. Beautiful, my mother once said. Cursed, everyone else decided. Everyone. The morning it all changed began like any other. I stood at my narrow window watching the courtyard 3 stories below, where King Aldrich had ordered an execution. The prisoner was a merchant, accused of trading with dragon-blooded people from the north. His crime was not theft or murder, but association. In the Southern Kingdom, that was enough. I turned away before the blade fell. I had seen too many such deaths. Each one burned itself into my memory, a reminder of what my kingdom had become under Aldrich's rule, a place where fear dictated law, where difference meant death. The door to my chamber opened without ceremony. I reached for my veil instinctively, but my hands froze when I saw who entered. King Aldrich himself, tall and severe despite his 65 years, his silver beard trimmed to perfection. Behind him stalked Lord Mordain, his right hand and chief enforcer, a man whose cold eyes held no mercy. I lowered my gaze to the floor, as I had been taught. The worn stones beneath my feet had memorized the pattern of my pacing, 10 years of restless circles. "Your Majesty," I said, my voice steady though my heart raced. "Look at me, girl," Aldrich commanded. I raised my head, but kept my eyes downcast, a compromise between obedience and self-preservation. Through the white veil that covered my face, I could see their shapes, blurred and distant. "The northern delegation arrives today," Aldrich said, his voice sharp as winter wind. "King Callus, the one they call the White Wolf, comes seeking a peace treaty. He brings warriors, advisors, witnesses from all 7 kingdoms." I said nothing. What was there to say? The politics of kings had never included me. "If word spreads of our cursed Omega," Mordain added, his voice dripping with disdain, "it undermines our position. The North will see weakness. They will exploit it." I felt the familiar burn of shame mixed with anger. I had done nothing to deserve this exile, this constant degradation. My only crime was being born different. "You will remain in this tower," Aldrich continued. "You will not be seen. You will not be heard. If you disobey, if you embarrass me before the Northern King, the consequences will be severe. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Majesty," I whispered. But as they turned to leave, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Mordain's voice, low, and meant only for the king, but sound carries strangely in stone towers. "Perhaps it is time to dispose of the problem permanently, my lord. She serves no purpose." Aldrich's response came slowly. "Not yet. She may prove useful as leverage if negotiations fail. The North has strange sympathies for the marked ones." They left, and I stood frozen in the center of my small room. Leverage, a tool to be used or discarded. That was all I had ever been to him. I moved to my bookshelf, the one luxury I had been allowed. Books could not plot against a king. They could not spread rumors or challenge authority. For 10 years they had been my escape, my window into a world I could never touch. I pulled down a thick volume on the histories of the 7 kingdoms, seeking distraction in ancient wars and long-dead heroes. But my eyes caught on a passage I had read before, though never truly understood. It spoke of dragon-blooded families, of shapeshifters who could take the form of great beasts. The text claimed they were not monsters, but protectors, warriors who had defended humanity for millennia. It mentioned the Moon Blessed, rare individuals marked with silver who were said to bridge the gap between human and dragon. My fingers traced the words. "Marks like stars upon their skin," the book read. "Signs of power, not curse." A knock at my door startled me. I quickly returned the book to its shelf and adjusted my veil. A young servant girl entered, one I recognized. Mira, barely 14, with kind eyes and a gentle manner. She had been punished once for speaking to me with too much familiarity. Since then, she had learned to keep her distance, but sometimes I caught her watching me with something like sympathy. "Your meal, my lady," she said softly, setting down a tray of bread, cheese, and watered wine. "Thank you, Mira." She hesitated at the door, glancing back. Then so quietly I almost missed it, she whispered, "The Northern King is magnificent. They say he has never lost a battle, but that he shows mercy to those who surrender. They say he is different from our king." Before I could respond, she fled, the door closing with a soft thud. I stared at it for a long moment, my mind racing. A warrior king who showed mercy. In my world, the two concepts seemed impossible together. Strength and compassion did not coexist in the South. That evening, as twilight painted my small window purple and gold, I made a decision that would change everything. The Winter Moon Feast was happening tonight, a celebration that occurred once every 10 years when the moon reached its fullest and brightest. Kings and queens from all 7 kingdoms would gather in the Great Hall. There would be music, food, dancing, and most importantly, distraction. I had spent 10 years as a ghost in my own home. Just once, I wanted to see the world I had read about. I wanted to witness the legendary kings, see the fine clothes, hear the music that was more than wind through stone, and perhaps, a small voice in my heart whispered, I wanted to see this white wolf who supposedly combined strength with mercy. I waited until full darkness fell. The servants would be busy with the feast, the guards focused on protecting the gathered royalty. No one would notice one more shadow in the corridors. I wrapped myself in a dark blue cloak that I had hidden away for years, saved for a moment like this. I secured my veil carefully, making sure not a glimpse of my marked face could be seen. Then I slipped out of my tower room and down the narrow servant stairs. My heart hammered against my ribs with every step. If I was caught, if Aldrich discovered my disobedience, the punishment would be terrible. But fear had been my companion for so long that it felt almost familiar now. I was tired of letting it rule me. The Great Hall stole my breath. I had imagined it 1,000 times from descriptions in books, but reality surpassed even my most vivid dreams. 100 candles hung from the ceiling in glass spheres, their light dancing like captured stars. Long tables lined the walls, covered with more food than I had seen in my entire life. Roasted meats glistened, their scents mixing with sweet cakes and exotic fruits from lands I had only read about. But it was the people who truly amazed me. Men and women in silks and velvets, colors I had no names for, jewels catching the candlelight like tiny suns. Laughter filled the air, real laughter, not the nervous kind I sometimes heard from servants. Musicians played instruments I could not identify, creating melodies that seemed to physically move through the space. I pressed myself against a stone column, staying in the shadows. From here, I could observe without being observed. I watched the dancers spin in the center of the hall, their movements graceful and joyful. I watched servants weave between tables with practiced efficiency. I watched kings and queens negotiate and flirt and scheme, their faces masks of civility, hiding whatever truths lay beneath. Then the great doors opened, and the hall fell silent. They entered like a force of nature. 20 men in silver armor that caught and reflected the candlelight, each one moving with the disciplined precision of a seasoned warrior. But it was the man in the center who drew every eye, who seemed to command the very air around him. King Callus of the North, the White Wolf. He was younger than I expected, perhaps 30 years, though his eyes held the weight of more. White hair fell past his shoulders, stark against his tanned skin. His armor was lined with white fur, and silver wolves adorned each shoulder guard. He was tall and broad, built like the warriors I had read about in ancient epics. But it was his face that captured me. Strong features, yes, but there was something in his expression that spoke of more than just power. A stillness, a control, as if he held great force in careful check. The crowd parted as he walked through the hall. Some bowed, others simply stared. He acknowledged them with small nods but did not stop, his focus somewhere ahead. King Aldrich stepped forward to greet him, and I watched the 2 men face each other, one old and cunning, the other young and strong, 2 very different kinds of power. I should have stayed hidden. I should have kept to my shadows and observed silently. But something drew my gaze back to the Northern King, and in that moment he turned. Our eyes met across the crowded hall. Time seemed to slow. The noise of the feast faded to a distant hum. There was only those blue eyes, sharp and clear as winter ice, locked on mine through the veil. I could not look away, could not move, could not breathe. His expression changed, shifting from polite interest to something else. Recognition? Surprise? His lips moved, forming a single word I could not hear but somehow understood. Isadora, my mother's name. Panic shot through me like lightning. How did he know that name? How could he possibly recognize me through my veil, through the years since my mother's death? It was impossible. It had to be impossible. He took a step toward me. I ran, pushing through servants and guests, not caring who I jostled or offended. Behind me I heard a voice call out, deep and commanding, but I did not stop. Up the servant stairs I flew, my legs burning, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Only when I reached my tower room and locked the door did I allow myself to collapse. I sat on my narrow bed, shaking. My mind spun with questions I could not answer. The Northern King had looked at me, really looked at me, and seen something. He had spoken my mother's name. It was impossible, and yet it had happened. I lay awake all night, watching the moon arc across my small window. Below, the sounds of the feast continued until the early hours of morning. Music and laughter drifted up to my lonely tower, mocking me with their joy. But I barely heard them. My thoughts were consumed by those blue eyes and that impossible word. Isadora. 3 days passed in agonizing slowness. I jumped at every sound, certain that guards would burst through my door at any moment. But no one came. Not even the servants seemed to know what I had done. Perhaps in the chaos of the feast, in a hall filled with hundreds of people, no one had noticed one veiled girl in the shadows. Perhaps the Northern King had forgotten me already. On the 4th night, the worst storm of winter descended on the Southern Kingdom. Wind howled around my tower like a living thing, full of rage and hunger. Snow fell so thick I could see nothing beyond my window, just white emptiness. I wrapped myself in every blanket I owned and huddled near my small fire, trying to read by candlelight. The book in my hand spoke of dragon lore, ancient texts I had pored over before, but which now seemed to hold new meaning. I found the passage about Moon-Blessed again and read it carefully. "They are bridges between worlds," the text claimed. "Marked by silver stars upon their skin, they carry the blood of both human and dragon. They are not cursed but chosen, born to unite what has been divided." Could it be true? Could these marks that had defined my entire life, that had condemned me to isolation and shame, actually mean something else, something not terrible? The knock came so suddenly and so violently that I dropped my book. Not the polite tap of a servant, but desperate pounding that shook the door in its frame. My tower had 2 doors, one at the top where servants brought my meals, one at the bottom, accessible from outside, that no one had used in 10 years. The pounding came from below. I grabbed my candle and crept down the spiral stairs. The wooden door rattled with each impact. Snow blew through cracks in the ancient wood, dusting the stone floor white. "Please!" a voice called, barely audible over the howling wind. "Someone help us!" It was not the voice of guards coming to arrest me. It was not Lord Mordain come to carry out his threat. It was the voice of someone desperate, someone in pain. "She is dying," the voice called again. My hand went to the iron bolt. Every instinct screamed at me to stay hidden, to pretend I heard nothing. But that voice, that desperation, pulled at something deep inside me. I had spent 10 years alone, 10 years as a prisoner. I knew what it was to be helpless, to need aid that never came. I slid back the bolt and pulled the door open. Wind and snow exploded inward, nearly extinguishing my candle. I held my hand up to shield the flame and peered into the storm. A figure stood there, barely visible through the swirling white. Tall, broad, covered in snow and ice, and in his arms, a small bundle wrapped in white fur. The figure stumbled forward into the shelter of the tower, and candlelight revealed what the storm had hidden. My heart stopped. It was him, the Northern King, the White Wolf, King Callus. But this was not the powerful warrior I had seen in the Great Hall. This man was wounded, armor-dented and stained dark with blood. Ice clung to his white hair, and his face was pale with cold and pain. Yet he held the small bundle as if it were made of glass, as if nothing in the world mattered more. "You," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. His blue eyes found mine through my veil. "The girl from the feast." I should have slammed the door, should have run. But then I saw what he carried. A little girl, no more than 8 years old, her face as white as the snow outside. Her lips were blue with cold, and dried blood crusted one side of her small face. She was not moving. "What happened?" I heard myself ask. Callus stumbled, nearly fell. I caught his arm on instinct, felt the iron strength in it even now, weakened as he was. "Poison," he managed. "Shadow Nightshade. We were attacked on the road back to our kingdom. My men are dead. The castle guards would not help us. I saw your light in the window. I took a chance." I looked at the child in his arms, so small and still. Then at the man holding her, a king reduced to a desperate father figure begging for help. "Bring her in," I said, quickly, before someone sees. I closed and bolted the door, sealing us away from the storm. Callus carried his burden up the narrow stairs, each step seeming to cost him. In the brighter light of my room, I could see just how bad things were. The little girl's skin had taken on a gray tinge, and dark veins spread up her neck from a small wound on her shoulder. Shadow Nightshade, one of the deadliest poisons in the Seven Kingdoms. Few survived it, even fewer knew how to treat it. But I did, not because anyone had taught me, because I had spent 10 years with nothing but books, and many of those books detailed plants that could heal or harm. Shadow Nightshade had fascinated me with its terrible efficiency. I had memorized every detail about it, never imagining I would need that knowledge. "Put her on my bed," I instructed, moving into action. My fear forgotten, my questions pushed aside. There was only the problem before me and the knowledge in my head. Callus laid his sister down with infinite care. I could see the fear in his eyes, the helplessness. He was a king, a warrior, a legend. But right now he was just a brother, watching his sister die. "What is your name?" he asked as I gathered materials. I hesitated, then pulled back my hood and untied my veil. If I was going to save this child, I needed to see clearly. I needed full freedom of movement, and somehow in this moment, hiding seemed less important than helping. "Seraphina," I said, letting my marked face show for the first time in 10 years to someone other than servants. "But most call me Sarah." His eyes widened as he saw my marks clearly. The constellation of silver that spread across my left cheek and temple, down my neck, catching the firelight like scattered stardust. I waited for the disgust, the fear, the revulsion I had seen so many times before. Instead, he whispered, "Isidore's daughter. I knew it." "How do you know my mother's name?" The question burst from me even as I crushed herbs in my mortar. "She was my father's younger sister, my aunt. She disappeared 20 years ago, fled from the Northern Kingdom when prophecies began to speak of doom. We searched for years but never found her." I stopped moving, stared at him. "My mother was royalty? Northern royalty?" "The marks," Callus continued, nodding at my face. "They only appear on those with dragon blood. Moon-blessed, the ancient texts call them. Your mother had them too, though hers were on her hands." My mind reeled. Dragon blood, moon-blessed, not cursed, not shameful, something else entirely. But the little girl moaned in pain, and I forced myself to focus. Questions could wait. Her life could not. "I need ingredients from the castle garden and kitchen," I said. "Rare plants, specific supplies. Can you get them?" Callus tried to stand, swayed dangerously. I saw the blood seeping through his armor at his side. "You are wounded too," I said. "It is nothing compared to her." "It will be everything if you bleed to death before getting what I need," I countered. "You stay here. Keep her warm. I will go." His eyes searched mine. "You would risk yourself?" "I have spent 10 years in this tower, invisible and forgotten. Tonight I am neither. Give me your list." I scrawled the ingredients I needed on parchment, my hands surprisingly steady. As I wrapped my cloak around my shoulders, Callus caught my wrist. "Thank you, Sarah. Whatever happens, thank you." His touch was warm despite the cold that clung to him. I nodded and slipped out into the sleeping castle. The hallways were dark and empty, most residents asleep or sheltering from the storm. I moved like a shadow, using every trick I had learned in 10 years of invisibility. Twice I had to hide from passing guards, pressing myself into alcoves until they moved on. My heart thundered in my chest, but I did not stop. The garden was buried in snow, but I knew where to dig. I had watched these plants from my window for years, memorized their locations through the seasons. My fingers quickly grew numb as I unearthed what I needed. Nightsbane root, silver leaf, frostberry. The kitchen was more dangerous. Even at this hour, there were people about. I waited in shadow, patient as a cat, until the cook stepped out to fetch more wood. Then I darted in, grabbed the oils and powders I needed, and vanished back into darkness. By the time I returned to my tower, my hands shook from cold and fear, but I had everything, every single ingredient. Callus sat beside the bed, holding his sister's small hand. He looked up as I entered, hope and fear warring in his eyes. I got to work immediately, crushing, mixing, heating water over my fire. The process was complex, each step critical. Too much of one ingredient would be as deadly as the poison itself. Too little would be useless. Callus watched in silence. Once he asked, "Where did you learn this?" "Books," I answered simply. "I have read every text in the castle library twice over." "You are remarkable," he said quietly. "I am desperate," I corrected. "There is a difference." But as I worked, I felt something else. Purpose. For the first time in 10 years, I was not just surviving. I was doing something that mattered, saving a life. The medicine turned from green to deep blue, exactly as the books had described. I poured it into a cup and brought it to the bedside. "We need to make her drink all of it," I told Callus. Together we lifted the little girl's head. I held the cup to her blue lips while Callus coaxed her to swallow. Most of the medicine went down, though some spilled onto the blankets. "Now we wait," I said, sitting back. "If she makes it through the night, she will live." Callus nodded, never taking his eyes from his sister. For the first time, I noticed just how badly he was hurt. The blood at his side had soaked through multiple layers. "Take off your armor," I ordered. "Let me see your wound." "I am fine." "You are bleeding. Do not make me say it twice, Your Majesty." A small smile touched his lips despite the circumstances. "You are very commanding for someone who spent 10 years hiding." "I spent 10 years observing," I corrected. "There is a difference." He struggled with the straps of his armor, and I helped him lift the heavy breastplate away. His shirt beneath was soaked with blood. A deep gash ran along his ribs, still seeping. "This needs cleaning or it will fester," I said, reaching for clean cloth and water. As I cleaned his wound, I felt his eyes on me, watching my face, my movements, my marks. "You look like her," he said softly, "like Isadora. Same eyes, same determination." "Tell me about her," I said, surprising myself. "Tell me about my mother." So he did. As I tended his wound, he spoke of a young woman who had been kind and fierce, who loved books and learning, who questioned everything, who disappeared one night 20 years ago after priests warned of a prophecy. "What prophecy?" I asked. "That a child born with the moon's blessing would end the Southern King's line, would unite the 7 kingdoms under a new rule." I paused in my work. "King Aldrich feared this prophecy?" "Enough to hunt down and kill any child born with the marks. Your mother fled to protect you, and herself." The pieces fell into place. Aldrich's treatment of me, his talk of leverage, he knew what I was, what I represented, a threat to his power. I finished wrapping Callus's ribs in clean cloth. Our faces were close in the firelight, close enough that I could see flecks of silver in his blue eyes. "Why did you come to my tower?" I asked. "Why not seek help from someone more powerful?" "Because when our eyes met across that hall," he said quietly, "I saw something I recognized. Not just your mother's face. I saw someone who knew what it was to be alone, to be different, to be hunted." We held that gaze for a long moment. Then the little girl stirred, making a small sound. We both turned to her. Her color was already better, the gray fading from her skin. Her breathing came easier. "It is working," Callus breathed. "Sarah, you did it." Relief flooded through me so intense it made me dizzy. She would live. This small, innocent child would live, because I had knowledge and courage enough to use it. The little girl's eyes fluttered open. They were blue like her brother's, but softer, like summer sky. "Callus," she whispered. He was at her side instantly, taking her hand. "I am here, little one. You are safe." Her eyes found me, focused on my marked face with no veil to hide it. I reached for cloth to cover myself, but her small voice stopped me. "Pretty," she said with a weak smile. "Like stars." Something broke open inside me. A wall I had built long ago, crumbling under the simple words of a child who saw beauty where others had seen only curse. "What is your name?" I asked gently. "Elara," she said. "Are you the one who saved me?" "I helped," I said. "Your brother brought you to safety." But Elara shook her head slightly. "Callus told me once that the bravest warriors are not the ones with the biggest swords. They are the ones who choose to help when they could choose to hide." I looked at Callus, who gave me a small, approving nod. The night deepened around us. The storm raged outside, but inside my tower, for the first time in 10 years, I did not feel alone. Callus dozed in a chair by the fire, exhausted from his wounds. Elara slept peacefully, the poison fading from her system. And I sat watching them both, these strangers who had crashed into my isolated life and changed everything. As dawn's first light began to creep through my window, Ilara stirred again. She was stronger now, able to sit up with help. "Thank you, Sarah," she said in her small, clear voice. "You are very brave." "I am not brave," I said. "I am just a girl in a tower." "No," Callus said from his chair. He had woken but stayed still, watching us. "You are Seraphina of the Sapphire Dragon line. You are moon-blessed. You are my cousin and a princess by blood. And you are brave beyond measure." I stared at him. A princess, dragon-blooded, moon-blessed. The words seemed impossible, too large for someone like me. "I am a prisoner," I said quietly. "That is all I have ever been." Callus rose, moving slowly because of his wound. He crossed to where I sat and knelt so we were eye level. "Then come with us," he said. "When we leave, come north, where no one will cage you, where your marks will be honored, not hidden." My heart leaped at the thought. Freedom, a life beyond these stones. But fear rose just as quickly. Aldrich would never allow it. He would hunt me down. "Then we will protect you," Ilara piped up. "Callus is the strongest warrior in all the kingdoms. No one can beat him." The little girl's faith was absolute, but I knew the world was more complicated than that. I had seen what Aldrich did to those who defied him. Before I could respond, we heard it. Heavy boots on the stairs, many pairs of boots, coming up to my tower. "Hide!" I hissed, grabbing for my veil. But it was too late. The door burst open. Lord Mordain stood there with 6 guards, all armed with swords. "Well," he said with a cruel smile, "what do we have here?" For a moment, no one moved. Then Mordain's eyes found Callus, found Ilara. "The Northern King," Mordain said, his voice filled with dark satisfaction. "Hiding in the cursed girl's tower. How very interesting." The guards moved to enter. Callus stood, placing himself between them and Ilara. His hand went to where his sword should be, but of course he was unarmed, wounded, exhausted. This was not how the story was supposed to end, not now when hope had finally found me. But then something happened that none of us expected. Callus's body began to change, his hands elongated, fingers becoming claws. His eyes shifted from blue to molten silver. Scales rippled across his skin, silver and shining. The guard stumbled back in shock. Mordain's face went white. "Dragon," he breathed. "Impossible." Before their eyes, Callus transformed. Not into the wolf his title suggested, but into something far more magnificent and terrible. His body grew, expanded, reshaped itself. Wings burst from his back, silver membranes stretching between bone. His armor fell away as his form became too large to contain. In the space where a man had stood, a dragon now towered. Silver scales caught the morning light streaming through my window, each one perfect as polished metal. His wings filled most of my small tower room, and his eyes, still that piercing blue, focused on the guards with predatory intensity. He opened his mouth and roared. The sound shook the very stones of the tower. Dust fell from the ceiling. The nearest guard dropped his sword and fled. The others quickly followed, stumbling over each other in their panic. Mordain stood frozen for one heartbeat longer, his face a mask of terror and fury. Then he too ran, his footsteps echoing down the stairs. The dragon that was Callus slowly shrank, reformed, became a man again. He swayed on his feet, the transformation having cost him dearly in his wounded state. I caught his arm, steadying him. "You are not a wolf," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "No," he agreed, breathing heavily. "That is just what they call me. It is easier for people to believe in wolves than dragons." Ilara giggled from the bed despite everything. Now they know the truth. But the truth brought new danger. Mordain would tell Aldrich. The castle would know that dragons still existed, that the Northern King was one of them. The tentative peace would shatter, and we would be hunted. "We have to leave," I said. "Now, before they come back with an army." Callus nodded. "Can you fly? Have you discovered your dragon form?" "I do not know how," I admitted. "I did not even know it was possible until right now." "Then you will ride with me," he said simply. "Both of you." He moved to the window, threw it open. Cold morning air rushed in, carrying the last flakes of the storm. Beyond, the city was waking. Soon the alarm would be raised. "Trust me," Callus said, holding out his hand. I looked at that hand, looked at Ilara, who watched me with absolute faith, looked at my tower room, my prison for 10 years. Everything I had ever known was here, in these cold stones and cruel silences. But everything I had ever dreamed of was out there, in a world I had only read about, in a life I had never dared to hope for. I took his hand. Together we went to the window. Callus lifted Alara gently, securing her against his chest. Then he began to change again, his body flowing into that magnificent dragon form. This time I watched in wonder rather than fear. The transformation was beautiful in its own terrible way. Power made flesh, strength unchained. "Climb on," he said, his voice deeper but still recognizably his. I had never ridden anything in my life, had barely left my tower, but I pulled myself onto his broad back, finding purchase between the silver scales. They were warm to the touch, not cold as I expected, smooth as polished stone. "Hold tight," Callus warned. I wrapped my arms around Alara, who pressed back against me, and then the dragon leaped from the window. We fell. The ground rushed up to meet us, the courtyard far below growing larger with terrifying speed. I buried my face against Alara's hair, sure we would crash, sure this was how my brief taste of freedom would end. Then came a great whoosh as Callus's wings spread wide. Our fall transformed into a glide, then a climb. We shot upward, rising fast above the castle walls. The wind tore at my cloak and hair. My stomach dropped as we climbed higher, higher, until the castle became small below us. I dared to look. The world spread out beneath us, vast and beautiful in the morning light. The southern kingdom stretched in all directions, white with snow and dotted with small villages. Beyond it, I could see the dark line of the northern forests, the mountains that marked the border. We flew north, leaving behind everything I had ever known, leaving behind my prison and my shame. Flying toward a future I could not imagine but desperately wanted to see. The sun rose fully as we flew, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. I had seen 1,000 sunrises from my tower window. But this was different. This was freedom. "Sarah!" Alara called over the wind. "Look!" I followed her pointing finger and saw them. 5 more dragons in the distance, flying parallel to us. Smaller than Callus, but no less magnificent. They had been following, protecting their king. We flew for hours. The landscape below changed from cultivated fields to wild forest to rocky foothills. My body ached from gripping Callus's scales, from the constant buffeting of wind, but I did not complain. Each mile was a victory. Each moment in the open air was a gift. Finally, as afternoon shadows grew long, we descended. Callus found a cave in the side of a mountain, well hidden from any roads below. We landed, and he transformed back to human form. He staggered as his feet touched stone, and I caught him again. "You need to rest," I said. "That wound, all this flying, you are going to collapse." "Just need a moment," he muttered. But his eyes were already closing. I helped him to the back of the cave, built a small fire from dead wood near the entrance, tended his wound again with strips torn from my cloak. Alara helped as best she could, her small hands surprisingly steady. "Is he going to be all right?" she asked. "Yes," I said with more confidence than I felt. "He is strong. He just needs rest." As night fell over the mountains, I sat between them. Callus sleeping fitly, his breathing labored. Alara curled against my side, trusting and warm. Outside, the other dragons stood guard in their human forms, warriors who had followed their king into danger. I thought about the tower I had left behind, the veil I no longer wore, the life of shadow and shame that had defined 16 years. It was gone now. There was no going back. But as I sat in that cave, with a wounded king and a brave child depending on me, I realized something. I was not afraid. I was not alone. And for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was meant to be. Alara stirred, looked up at me with those blue eyes. "Sarah," she whispered, "will you stay with us, even when we get home?" I brushed hair from her face. This child who had called my marks beautiful, who had seen past curse to truth. "Yes," I said, "I will stay." She smiled and closed her eyes. Within moments she slept. I sat awake through the long night, keeping watch over these two who had given me the greatest gifts I had ever received. Hope, purpose, family. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Aldrich would be hunting us. The journey north would be dangerous. Nothing was certain except that the easy path was behind us. But as I watched Callus breathe, as I felt Alara's small form tucked against my side, as I saw the stars through the cave mouth bright and clear as the marks on my face, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I was free, and I would fight to stay that way. Dawn broke cold and merciless over the mountain cave. I woke to find Callus already sitting up, his face drawn with pain, but his eyes clear and focused. He was retying the bandages around his ribs with steady hands, the movements of a man long accustomed to tending his own wounds. "We need to move," he said when he noticed I was awake. "Aldrich's hunters will be searching. They know we cannot have gone far with me wounded." "How far to the northern border?" I asked, checking on Alara. The little girl still slept, exhausted from yesterday's ordeal. 3 days on foot through this terrain. 1 day if I could fly, but I cannot carry both of you that distance in my condition. The transformation takes strength I do not have right now." I nodded, understanding the problem immediately. "Then we walk, at least until you are stronger." His 5 warriors entered the cave then, having kept watch through the night. Their leader, a man Callus introduced as Captain Drevin, knelt before his king. "Your Majesty, we found tracks. A hunting party, maybe 20 men, 2 miles south and heading this way. They have dogs." Callus stood, wincing as the movement pulled at his wound. "How long until they reach us?" 2 hours if we are fortunate, less if the dogs pick up our scent. I looked at Alara, still sleeping peacefully. 2 hours to cover ground with a wounded man and a small child. It was not enough time. "There is another way," I said slowly, an idea forming. "The hunters are looking for 3 people traveling together. A king, a child, and a cursed girl. What if they found something different?" Callus turned to me, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You want to split up." "Not split up. Misdirect. I take Alara one direction while your men leave obvious tracks another way. The hunters follow the larger group. We circle around and meet at a rendezvous point. That puts you in danger," Callus said. "If you are caught alone with Alara, you have no protection." "I survived 10 years in Aldrich's castle," I reminded him. "I know how to be invisible when I need to be. And Alara is small and light. We can move through places your warriors cannot." Drevin spoke up. "It is a sound strategy, Your Majesty. Divide their forces, multiply our options." Callus looked at me for a long moment. I saw the calculation in his eyes, the tactical mind weighing risks and benefits. Finally he nodded. "Very well, but you take this." He removed a silver pendant from around his neck, a wolf's head, intricately carved. "If you run into northern patrols, show them this. They will know you are under my protection." I took the pendant, feeling the weight of it. The metal was warm from his skin. "Where do we meet?" I asked. "There is a river," Drevin said, kneeling to draw a map in the cave dirt. "It runs along the border. Follow it north until you reach a stone bridge. We will wait there." I memorized the simple map. 2 days' travel for someone my size with a child. We would have to move quickly and carefully. Alara woke as we were preparing to leave. Her eyes went wide when Callus explained the plan. "I want to stay with you," she said, clutching her brother's hand. "I know, little one," he said gently. "But Sarah needs you to be brave. Can you do that for me?" Alara looked at me, then back at her brother. She straightened her small shoulders. "I can be brave." "That is my fierce little wolf," Callus said, hugging her close. He looked at me over her head. "Keep her safe, Sarah." "With my life," I promised. We left the cave in opposite directions. Callus and his warriors headed east, making no effort to hide their passage. They wanted to be found, to draw the hunters away. Alara and I went west, moving slowly and carefully, stepping on rocks where we could to avoid leaving tracks. The first day was harder than I expected. I had spent 10 years in a tower with little physical activity beyond pacing my small room. My legs burned with every step. My lungs ached in the thin mountain air. But I did not stop, could not stop. Alara's life depended on me now, and that was a weight I would not fail to carry. The little girl was remarkably resilient. She did not complain even when I knew her small legs must be tired. When we had to climb over fallen logs or scramble up rocky slopes, she did so without protest. At one point she slipped and scraped her knee. Tears filled her eyes, but she did not cry out. "You are very brave," I told her as I cleaned the scrape with water from a stream. Callus says bravery is not about not being scared. It is about being scared and doing it anyway. Your brother is very wise. She nodded seriously. He had to be. Our parents died when I was only 2. He was 20. He became king and my guardian all at once. People said he was too young, that he would fail. But he proved them wrong. I could hear the fierce pride in her voice. This child loved her brother with an intensity that made my heart ache. I had never known that kind of bond. My mother had loved me, yes, but she died when I was 6. Since then, I had been alone. "Tell me about the north," I said as we walked. "What is it like?" Alara's face lit up. "It is beautiful. Cold, but beautiful. Our castle is built into a mountain, with towers that reach up to touch the clouds. In winter, everything is white and silver. The trees never lose their leaves, even in the deepest snow, and the people are kind. They do not fear those with marks like yours. They honor them. Do many people have marks? Not many, she admitted. Dragon blood has grown thin over the years. Most people are fully human now. But those with the marks are special, protected. Callus says it is because they remember the old times, when dragons and humans lived in harmony. We camped that night in a hollow beneath an overhanging rock. I built no fire for fear the smoke would give us away. We huddled together for warmth, sharing what little food I had managed to grab before fleeing the cave. Some dried meat from Callus's supplies and a few pieces of hard bread. "Are you scared?" Alara asked in the darkness. "Yes," I admitted, "I am terrified." "But you are doing it anyway." I smiled despite my fear. "Yes, I am doing it anyway. We are the same, you and I," she said, "both brave." I held her closer as she drifted off to sleep. The night sounds of the forest surrounded us. Owls hooting, small creatures rustling in the underbrush, the wind sighing through the trees. I had read about these sounds in books, but experiencing them was entirely different. Every noise made me tense, imagining hunters or wild animals, but nothing came. The night passed slowly, and when dawn arrived, we moved on. The second day was worse. We were both exhausted, our supplies gone. I tried to remember what I had read about edible plants, but most of what I saw was unfamiliar. I did not dare risk poisoning us with the wrong choice. Alara's steps grew slower. Her face was pale, her lips cracked from cold. I carried her when I could, but I was not strong enough to do so for long. My own strength was failing. "Just a little further," I kept saying, "just a little more." But I was lying. I had no idea how much further we had to go. The forest all looked the same. I might have been walking in circles for all I knew. Then, late in the afternoon, I heard it, the sound of running water, the river. Relief flooded through me so intensely I nearly wept. We stumbled through the last stretch of forest and emerged on the bank of a wide river. Ice clung to its edges, but the center still flowed, dark and swift. "We made it," I said, setting Alara down. "We just have to follow this north to the bridge." But Alara did not respond. She had collapsed onto the snowy ground, her small chest heaving. I knelt beside her, felt her forehead. She was burning with fever. "No, not now, not when we were so close." I scooped her up, feeling how light she was, how fragile. Started walking along the riverbank, one foot in front of the other. My vision blurred with exhaustion, but I kept moving. The sun was setting when I heard voices, male voices, coming from ahead. I quickly hid behind a large boulder, clutching Alara to my chest. Were they hunters? Northern soldiers? I had no way to know. Then I remembered this pendant Callus had given me. I pulled it out, the silver wolf gleaming in the fading light. If these were Northern soldiers, this would identify me. If they were Aldrich's hunters, I would be captured. I had to choose. I stood up, walked into view. 5 men in silver armor stopped talking and stared. Their hands went to their sword hilts. "I am Seraphina," I called out, my voice hoarse. "I travel under the protection of King Callus. Princess Alara is with me. She needs help." The men exchanged glances. One stepped forward, an older warrior with a scarred face. "Show me the token," he commanded. I held up the pendant. He studied it, then nodded. "That is the king's seal. Where is his majesty?" "Drawing away hunters. We were supposed to meet at the stone bridge. It is half a mile north. Can you walk?" "I have to," I said. The warrior, who introduced himself as Lieutenant Gareth, took Alara from my arms. The little girl barely stirred. Her fever had worsened. "We need to move quickly," Gareth said. "The bridge is at the border. Once we cross, you will be safe." Those last 500 yards were the longest of my life. Every step was agony. My vision tunneled. My legs trembled. But I kept walking because the alternative was failing, and I had made a promise. The stone bridge appeared through the trees like a miracle. Ancient and weathered, it spanned the river in a graceful arc. And there, on the far side, stood Callus. He looked better than when we had parted. 2 days of rest had restored some of his strength. But when he saw us, saw Alara limp in Gareth's arms, his face went white. "What happened?" he demanded as we crossed the bridge. "Fever," I managed to say. "Started this afternoon." Callus took his sister gently, cradling her. "Marin," he called. "Where is Marin?" An older woman with gray hair hurried forward. She was the healer, I realized, the one who had come with Callus's warriors. "Bring her to the shelter," Marin said. "All business. I have medicines prepared." They carried Alara away. I tried to follow, but my legs finally gave out. Strong arms caught me before I hit the ground. Callus had returned, was lifting me as easily as he had carried his sister. "You did it," he said softly. "You kept her safe." "Is she going to be all right?" I asked. "Marin is the best healer in 7 kingdoms. If anyone can help her, she can." He carried me to a small tent that had been set up near the bridge, laid me down on soft furs. Someone brought me water and I drank greedily. Food appeared and I ate without tasting it. Callus sat beside me the entire time. When I finally stopped shaking from exhaustion, I looked at him. "Did the hunters follow you?" "For a day and a half. We led them on a fine chase through the mountains. Then Drevin and the others circled back and scattered them. No casualties on our side, several on theirs." I closed my eyes. "We made it. We actually made it." "You did more than that," Callus said. "You saved Alara twice now. First from the poison, now from exposure. She would have died if you had not kept moving." "I did what anyone would do." "No," he said firmly. "You did what a warrior would do, what a protector would do. Do not diminish that, Sarah." I opened my eyes to find him watching me with an expression I could not quite read. Respect, certainly, but something else, something that made my breath catch. The moment broke when Drevin entered the tent. "Your Majesty," he said, "riders approaching from the south, 20 men, heavily armed. They are flying Aldrich's banner." Callus stood immediately. "How long?" 10 minutes, perhaps less. They are moving fast." I struggled to sit up. "They found us." "We are on northern soil now," Callus said. "They have no authority here, but that has never stopped Aldrich before." "What do we do?" I asked. "We talk first. Fight only if we must. I will not start a war on the border if it can be avoided." He left the tent. I forced myself to stand and follow, though my legs screamed in protest. I would not hide while others faced danger on my behalf. The Southern soldiers arrived moments later in a thunder of hooves. They formed a line on the south side of the bridge, their armor gleaming in the last light of day. At their head rode Lord Mordain himself, his face twisted with fury. "King Callus," he called across the water, "you harbor fugitives. Return them to face justice in the Southern Kingdom." "I harbor my own family," Callus replied calmly. "Princess Seraphina is my cousin by blood. She is under my protection." "She is a criminal and a curse-bearer," Mordain spat. "King Aldrich demands her return." "King Aldrich has no claim on her. She is of northern blood, born of the dragon lines. She belongs here." Mordain's hand went to his sword. "If you do not surrender her, we will take her by force." "You are welcome to try," Callus said, his voice dropping to something dangerous. "But understand that you are on the border between our kingdoms. An attack here would be an act of war. Is one girl worth that to Aldrich?" "She is worth everything to him," Mordain said. "She represents his doom. The prophecy says she will end his line. He will not rest until she is destroyed." "Then he will have a long and restless life," Callus said, "because she is not going anywhere." For a long moment the two forces faced each other across the bridge, swords drawn, bows knocked. One wrong move and blood would spill. Then a new voice cut through the tension. "Stand down." Everyone turned. From the northern side of the bridge, an old man was approaching. He wore robes of deep blue and carried a staff of white wood. Power radiated from him in waves I could feel even from a distance. "Counselor Kalen," Callus said, surprise in his voice. "What are you doing here?" The old man reached the bridge. "I am here because the council received word of your flight. We sent riders to intercept you, and it seems we arrived just in time." He turned to face Mordain. "Tell your king that the Northern Kingdom recognizes Seraphina as one of our own. Any attempt to take her by force will be met with the full might of our armies. Is that clear enough?" Mordain's face purpled with rage. "This is not over." "Oh, I think it is," Kalen said mildly, "unless you wish to test whether 20 men can stand against 50 dragons, because that is what will come if you cross this bridge." It was a bluff. I knew Callus had said there were only a handful of dragons left in the world, but Mordain did not know that. Fear flickered across his face. "You will regret this," he said to Callus. "All of you will regret this." He wheeled his horse and rode away. His soldiers followed, disappearing into the gathering darkness. We would later learn that Lord Mordain, unable to return to Aldrich in failure, fled east to the Sea Kingdoms. He died 2 years later in a tavern brawl, unmourned and forgotten. Some men are consumed by the very hatred they carry. I let out a breath I had not realized I was holding. Callus came to stand beside me. "It is over," he said quietly. "You are safe now." But I shook my head. "It is not over. Not while Aldrich lives. Not while he sees me as a threat." "Then we will deal with that when it comes," Kalen said, approaching us. "For now, you are safe on northern soil, and we have much to discuss, young one." He studied my face, my marks, with eyes that seemed to see far more than they should. "Yes," he murmured, "you are definitely dragon-blooded. The marks do not lie. But there is something else about you, something I have not seen in many years." "What?" I asked. "Power," he said simply. "Raw and untrained, but there. You saved the princess twice, I am told. Once from poison that should have killed her within the hour. Once from exposure and fever. That takes more than book learning. That takes magic." "I do not have magic," I protested. "I just read a lot." "We shall see," Kaelin said with a small smile. "We shall see." That night we made camp on the northern side of the bridge. Alara's fever broke around midnight, and she woke asking for water. Marin declared her out of danger, to everyone's relief. I sat by the fire, wrapped in a warm cloak someone had given me. My body ached from 2 days of hard travel, but I was too keyed up to sleep. Across the flames, Callus sat talking quietly with Drevin and Kaelin, planning, strategizing, preparing for whatever came next. He caught my eye and gave me a small nod. In that simple gesture, I felt a connection forming. Not romantic, not yet, but something deeper. A bond forged through shared danger and mutual respect. Alara came to sit beside me, still weak but recovering. "Thank you for saving me," she said again. "You already thanked me." "I know, but I wanted to say it again. And I wanted to ask you something." "What? Will you stay with us? When we get home to Icevale Castle? Will you stay and be part of our family?" The question caught me off guard. I had not thought beyond survival, beyond escape. The idea of a future, of a home, seemed too large to comprehend. "I do not know what I am doing," I admitted. "I do not know how to be part of a family. I have been alone for so long." "That is okay," Alara said with the simple wisdom of children. "You can learn. We will teach you." She leaned against my side, and I put my arm around her small shoulders. Across the fire, Callus was watching us. When our eyes met, he smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. Perhaps, I thought, perhaps I could learn. We reached Icevale Castle 6 days later. The journey north was long but uneventful. Aldrich's forces did not pursue us past the border. We traveled through forests of evergreen that never lost their needles, over mountain passes where the wind cut like knives, through valleys where hot springs steamed in the frozen air. And everywhere we went, people came out to see their king, not with fear as I had seen in the south, but with genuine affection. Callus stopped in every village, spoke with farmers and craftsmen, listened to complaints and concerns. He was not a distant monarch, but a leader who knew his people. They stared at me, of course, at my unveiled face and silver marks, but there was no disgust in their gazes, only curiosity and in some cases reverence. "She is moon-blessed," I heard them whisper. "Dragon-marked, a good sign for the kingdom." The first sight of Icevale Castle stole my breath. It rose from the side of a mountain like it had grown there, white stone gleaming against gray rock. Towers reached toward the sky, their tops disappearing into low clouds. Windows of colored glass caught the afternoon sun, throwing rainbows across the snow. It was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. The gates opened as we approached. People lined the streets, cheering for their king's return. Children threw flower petals that looked strange against the white snow. Warriors saluted. Old women called out blessings. Callus rode at the front, sitting tall despite the lingering pain of his wound. Alara rode before him, waving to the crowds with delight. And I rode beside them on a horse that Drevin had provided, feeling like I had stumbled into someone else's dream. We entered the castle through massive doors carved with dragons in flight. The great hall beyond was everything Alara had described and more. High ceilings supported by pillars carved like trees, banners showing the silver dragon of House Callus, fireplaces large enough to stand in, blazing with warmth. And at the far end, waiting with a group of advisors, stood Counselor Kaelin. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing. "Welcome home." "It is good to be home," Callus replied, "though I wish it was under better circumstances." "Indeed, we have much to discuss. But first, let us get you settled. You have been through an ordeal." Servants appeared to take Alara away for a proper bath and warm food. She went reluctantly, looking back at me as if afraid I would disappear. "I will be here," I promised. "I am not going anywhere." They showed me to a room that made my tower chamber look like a closet. A massive bed with soft furs, a fireplace already lit and blazing, a window that looked out over the mountains, offering a view that went on forever, and best of all, a bath, hot water steaming in a copper tub, herbs floating on the surface. I soaked until the water grew cold, washing away days of travel. A servant had left clean clothes, not the rough homespun I was used to, but soft wool dyed deep blue, embroidered at the collar with silver thread. There was even a cloak lined with white fur. I dressed slowly, running my fingers over the fine fabric. These were not clothes for a prisoner or a servant. These were clothes for someone important. A knock came at my door. I opened it to find Callus standing there, also freshly bathed and dressed in clean clothes. His white hair was still damp, falling loose around his shoulders. "May I come in?" he asked. "Of course, this is your castle." He entered, glancing around. "They gave you the West Tower room. That is one of the best chambers in the castle." "It is beautiful," I said. "Too beautiful for someone like me." "Someone like you?" He frowned. "Sarah, you are a princess of the Northern Kingdom. This room is the least of what you deserve." "I am not really a princess," I said. "I am just a girl who got lucky. You are Isidore's daughter. That makes you royalty whether you feel like it or not." He moved to the window, looked out at the mountains. "Besides, titles mean less than actions. You have proven your worth a dozen times over." I joined him at the window. We stood in silence for a moment, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. "Thank you," I said quietly, "for everything, for taking us in, for protecting us, for giving us a home." "You gave me my sister's life twice over," he said. "I could never repay that debt if I lived 1,000 years." "It is not a debt," I said. "It is what anyone would have done." "No," he said, turning to face me. "It is what a warrior would have done, what a protector would have done. You risked everything for someone you barely knew. That is courage, Sarah. That is honor." His words made something warm bloom in my chest. No one had ever spoken to me like this, with respect, with admiration. The moment stretched between us, charged with something I did not have a name for. His eyes held mine, blue as winter ice, but somehow warm. I was suddenly very aware of how close we were standing, how tall he was, how my heart was beating faster. Then he stepped back, breaking the spell. "Rest tonight," he said, his voice slightly rougher. "Tomorrow the council will want to meet you, to verify your heritage and discuss your place here." "My place?" I asked. "What place?" "That is what we need to determine," he said. "But whatever happens, you have a home here. That much I promise." After he left, I stood at the window watching darkness fall over the mountains. A home. It was a word I had not applied to any place since my mother died. The tower had been a prison, the castle before that barely a memory. But perhaps, I thought, perhaps I could make a home here. I slept better that night than I had in years. No stone walls pressing close, no fear of discovery, just soft furs and warmth and silence. But peace was not meant to last. I woke to shouting, harsh voices echoing through the stone corridors. I dressed quickly and opened my door to find servants running past, their faces pale with fear. "What is happening?" I asked one. "The council," she gasped. "They are arguing about you, my lady. Some want you gone." My heart sank, of course. I had been foolish to think acceptance would come so easily. I made my way to the great hall, following the sound of raised voices. The massive doors stood open. Inside, I could see Callus standing before a semicircle of older men and women, all dressed in fine robes. The council. "We cannot harbor her," one man was saying, his voice harsh. "She is a target. Aldrich will use her as an excuse to attack us." "Let him try," Callus said coldly. "We are not afraid of the South." "It is not about fear," a woman said. "It is about wisdom. She is one girl. Is one life worth risking war?" I felt like I had been slapped. After everything, they still saw me as just a problem to be solved. Then Kaelin spoke, his voice cutting through the argument. "She is not just one girl. She is moon-blessed, dragon-marked. The prophecy speaks of one like her uniting the kingdoms." "Prophecies are children's tales," the harsh-voiced man scoffed. "We deal in reality." "Then let us test reality," Kaelin said. "Bring forth the bloodstone." Murmurs filled the hall. Servants hurried away and returned carrying a black stone on a silver pedestal. It was smooth as glass, about the size of a man's head, and it seemed to drink in the light around it. "The bloodstone knows dragon blood," Kaelin explained. "If Lady Seraphina has even a drop, it will glow. If she does not, it will remain dark." All eyes turned to the doorway where I stood. I had not meant to be seen, but there was no hiding now. "Come forward, child," Kaelin said gently. I walked down the center of the hall, feeling the weight of every stare. Callus gave me an encouraging nod as I passed him. I stopped before the bloodstone, looking at my reflection in its dark surface. "Place your hand upon it," Kaelin instructed. I reached out slowly, my heart pounding. What if I was wrong? What if the marks meant nothing? What if I was just a cursed girl after all? My palm touched the cold stone surface. Nothing happened. 1 second passed, 2, 3. I started to pull my hand away, embarrassment burning in my chest. "Wait!" Alara's voice called. She had slipped into the hall somehow, was standing beside Callus. "Give it time." I kept my hand on the stone. 4 seconds. 5. The harsh-voiced counselor opened his mouth to speak. Then light bloomed in the heart of the bloodstone. It started as a tiny spark, barely visible, but it grew, spreading outward like ripples in a pond. Silver light filled the stone, then shifted, changed to sapphire blue. The two colors swirled together, creating patterns like galaxies. The council gasped. Some stood from their seats. The harsh-voiced man's mouth hung open in shock. "2 bloodlines," Kaelin breathed. "Silver and sapphire. She carries both dragon houses in her veins." The light grew brighter until it filled the entire hall, reflecting off armor and stone, turning everything into a dreamscape of blue and silver. Then, just as suddenly, it faded. The stone returned to black glass. My hand was shaking as I pulled it away. "Impossible," someone whispered. "Not impossible," Kaelin said, prophesied. "She is the one the old texts speak of, the bridge between houses, the one who will unite what has been divided." I stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Dragon blood, 2 houses, prophecy. The words swirled in my mind without meaning. Then Callus was beside me, his hand on my shoulder, steadying me. "Does this satisfy this council?" he asked, his voice ringing with authority. "Or do you need more proof that she belongs here?" No one argued. Even the harsh-voiced man looked shaken. "Very well," Kaelin said. "Then it is settled. Lady Seraphina is recognized as a princess of the Northern Kingdom, with all rights and protections that entails. Any who dispute this will answer to me personally." The council members bowed, some more reluctantly than others, but they bowed. It was done. I was no longer the cursed girl. I was Seraphina, dragon-blooded, moon-blessed, princess of the North, and I had absolutely no idea what that meant. The days that followed passed in a blur of adjustment and discovery. Callus assigned me tutors who taught me northern customs and protocols, but the lessons I valued most came from Callus himself, who took responsibility for my combat training. "A queen must be able to defend herself," he said that first morning in the training yard. The training was humbling. Even Alara could best me with a wooden sword, but I improved day by day, my reactions growing faster, my strikes more accurate. The sessions became the highlight of my days, not just for the skills, but for the time they gave me with Callus. In the training yard, we were equals pushing each other to improve. He shared the weight of his crown, the burden of decisions that meant life or death. I shared my fears about my mother's death, my shame over the marks, my years of isolation. "You are not alone now," he said one evening. "You have a home here for as long as you want it." His words warmed something that had been cold inside me for 10 years. The 3rd week after our arrival, Alara convinced me to join her exploring the castle. The place was enormous, a labyrinth of corridors and chambers built over centuries. We discovered hidden passages, forgotten rooms, a library that made me gasp with delight at the thousands of books lining its walls. In one tower room, we found something that stopped me in my tracks. Paintings, dozens of them, showing people with marks like mine. Silver patterns on faces, hands, arms, dragon-marked individuals from throughout history. They were all moon-blessed, Alara explained. Some became great healers, some were warriors, some were scholars or diplomats. The marks mean you have a gift, but you get to choose what you do with it. I studied the faces in the paintings. They looked confident, proud, nothing like the shameful creature I had been taught to see myself as. "You will be in here one day," Alara said confidently, "when you do something amazing." "I am not going to do anything amazing," I said. "I am just trying to figure out how to fit in." "You already did something amazing," she countered. "You saved my life. That is pretty amazing to me." I pulled her into a hug, this fierce little girl who believed in me more than I believed in myself. But peace, as I was learning, was a fragile thing. 3 weeks after the Bloodstone ceremony, a messenger arrived from the south. He carried a letter sealed with Aldrich's crest. Callus read it in the great hall with his council present. His face grew dark as he read. "What does it say?" Kaelin asked. "War," Callus said flatly. Aldrich demands we return Serafina to face justice. If we refuse, he will consider it an act of aggression and respond accordingly. "Let him come," Drevin growled. "We will meet him on the field and end this." But Callus shook his head. A war would cost thousands of lives. Civilians would suffer, crops would burn, children would starve, all because one old king cannot let go of his fear. "So what do we do?" I asked, stepping forward. Everyone turned to look at me. "This is my fault. I should be the one to fix it." "This is not your fault," Callus said firmly. "This is Aldrich's choice, his fear, his cruelty. You are not responsible for his actions." But if I went back, I started. "No," he cut me off, his voice sharp with command. "You are not going back. Not now, not ever. I will not sacrifice you to appease a tyrant." His words were absolute, final. I saw in his eyes that he would go to war before giving me up. The realization made my chest tight with emotion I could not name. The council debated for hours. Some wanted to negotiate. Others wanted to prepare for battle. No one could agree on the right course of action. Finally, Kalen spoke. "There may be another option," he said slowly, "one that does not involve war or surrender." "We are listening," Callus said. The old man turned to me. "Lady Serafina suggested something earlier. What if she did go south? Not as a prisoner, but as a diplomat, to talk to Aldrich, to try to make him understand." "Absolutely not," Callus said immediately. "It is too dangerous." "It is dangerous," Kalen agreed. "But it might be the only way to avoid war. If she goes with a full escort, under flag of truce, Aldrich cannot harm her without violating sacred law." "And you trust him to respect sacred law?" Drevin asked skeptically. "No," Kalen admitted, "but I trust that he wants to avoid war as much as we do. His kingdom is weak from years of poor leadership. He cannot afford a prolonged conflict." "I will go," I said before I could lose my nerve. "If there is a chance to prevent bloodshed, I have to try." "Sarah, no," Callus said, standing. "I cannot allow this." "With respect, Your Majesty, you cannot stop me," I said, meeting his eyes. "You said yourself I am a princess. That means I have the right to make my own choices, and I choose this." The hall fell silent. Everyone watched as Callus and I faced each other across the space. I saw the conflict in his face, the desire to protect me warring with his respect for my autonomy. "If you go, I go with you," he said finally. "You will not face Aldrich alone." "Then we go together," I agreed. Preparations took a week. We would travel with 20 warriors under banner of truce. Kalen would stay behind to govern in Callus's absence. Alara would remain at Icevale, protected by the best guards in the kingdom. She was not happy about being left behind, but even she understood the danger. The night before we were to leave, I stood at my window watching the stars. A knock came at my door. I opened it to find Callus standing there holding two objects. One was a sword in a silver scabbard. The other was a cloak of deep blue, embroidered with silver constellations that matched my marks. "I thought you might want these," he said. "The sword was your mother's. Isadora was trained as a warrior before she fled. It seems fitting that you should have it." I took the blade, drew it part way. The steel gleamed in the firelight, perfectly balanced, deadly beautiful. "And the cloak?" "A gift," he said. "From me, so that everyone who sees you will know you are under my protection." I fastened the cloak around my shoulders. The fur lining was soft as cloud, the weight comforting. "Callus," I said softly, "why are you doing all this? For me?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. "Because when I look at you, I see courage. I see strength. I see someone who faced 10 years of isolation and came out still kind, still willing to help others, still believing the world could be better. That is rare, Sarah. That is precious." His words struck something deep in my chest, made my breath catch. We stood close in the doorway, close enough that I could see the silver flecks in his blue eyes, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from him. He reached up, his fingers brushing my cheek where the silver marks began. The touch was gentle, reverent. "You are remarkable," he said. "Never let anyone make you believe otherwise." Then he stepped back, breaking the moment. "Rest well," he said. "Tomorrow will be a long day." After he left, I stood holding the sword and wearing the cloak, feeling like I had been given far more than simple gifts. I had been given proof that I mattered, that I was worth protecting, worth fighting for. The journey south took 10 days. We rode through lands that grew progressively less welcoming as we approached the border. Northern villages gave way to contested territories where neither kingdom held firm control. We saw burned farms and abandoned towns, casualties of the long Cold War between North and South. "This is what Aldrich's fear has created," Callus said as we rode through one destroyed village. This emptiness, this waste. Then we have to make him see reason, I said. We have to make him understand that the prophecy is not about destruction. It is about unity. I hope you are right, he said. But hope has never been Aldrich's strong suit. We reached the southern capital on the 11th day. The gates opened reluctantly, and we rode through streets lined with sullen faces. These people did not welcome us. We were the enemy, come to their heart in time of tension. The castle loomed ahead, gray and forbidding. How different it looked from Icefield's white beauty. This was a place built for defense and intimidation, not for living. We were taken not to the great hall, but to a smaller throne room. There, waiting on a raised dais, sat King Aldrich. I had seen him 3 times in my life. Once when I was 6, and he had condemned me to the tower. Once 3 weeks ago, when he had threatened me before the winter moon feast, and now, he looked older. The weeks since our escape had not been kind to him. New lines creased his face. His hands trembled slightly as they gripped the arms of his throne. "So," he said, his voice harsh, "the White Wolf brings me the cursed girl willingly. Have you come to surrender?" "We have come to talk," Callus said calmly, "to find a path to peace." "There is no peace while she lives," Aldrich said, pointing at me. "She is the doom of my line. The prophecy says it plainly." "The prophecy says I will end your line," I said, stepping forward despite the guards who moved to block me. "But ending does not have to mean killing. It can mean transforming, uniting, growing into something new." "Pretty words," Aldrich sneered, "but words do not change fate." "No," I agreed. "But choices do. You have a choice now. Keep clinging to fear and drive both our kingdoms to war. Or let go, allow change, build something better." "And why would I trust you?" he asked. "You, who fled in the night, who consorted with dragons, who embody everything I have fought against." "Because I am your blood," I said quietly, "your granddaughter." The room went silent. Every eye turned to me. Even Callus looked shocked. "What did you say?" Aldrich whispered. "My mother was Isadora, your daughter, the one you tried to cure, the one who fled from your fear, the one whose death you caused when you sent men to drag us back." I moved closer, not caring about the guards now. "I know the whole story," I continued. "How you loved her, how you panicked when her marks appeared, how you tried everything to remove them because you were so afraid of the prophecy, how she ran to protect me, and how your soldiers killed her." Aldrich's face had gone ashen. His hands shook harder now. "She died hating you," I said, and the words felt like weapons. "But she also died hoping I would survive, that I would live the life she could not, that I would be free." I stopped at the base of the dais, looking up at this old man who had caused so much pain. "I am that hope," I said. "I am the future she died to protect, and I am standing here, alive and unbroken, offering you a chance at redemption. Take it, or spend your last years knowing you destroyed everything she loved." Aldrich stared at me. Tears ran down his weathered cheeks. "You look so much like her," he whispered. "Isadora, my little girl." "She was not your little girl," I said. "She was a woman, strong and brave, and she deserved better than what you gave her." "I know," he said, his voice breaking. "I have known for 20 years. Every day I have lived with that knowledge. Every night I see her face." "Then stop running from it," I said. "Face what you did, and choose differently now. Let me live. Let both our kingdoms have peace. Give Isadora's death meaning." The old king closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed. The hardness, the cruelty had faded. What remained was just a tired old man who had made terrible choices. "What do you propose?" he asked finally. The negotiations lasted 3 days. Aldrich, Callus, and I sat in a private chamber away from the eyes of courts and councils. In that room, stripped of crowns and ceremony, we were just 3 people trying to find a path forward. Aldrich wanted guarantees that I would not move against him, that the Northern Kingdom would respect Southern sovereignty, that his remaining years on the throne would be peaceful. Callus wanted assurances that Aldrich would cease his persecution of dragon-blooded people, that he would honor the borders, that he would not use this peace as an opportunity to rebuild his forces for future war. And I wanted something simpler. I wanted both kingdoms to see that the prophecy was not about destruction, but transformation. That ending Aldrich's line did not mean killing him, but rather ensuring his legacy became one of peace instead of fear. On the 3rd day we reached an accord. Aldrich would remain king of the South for his remaining years, however many that might be, but he would name me as his heir, recognizing me publicly as his granddaughter and the rightful successor to his throne. When he died, the Southern Kingdom would unite with the Northern under a single rule, 2 kingdoms becoming one, just as the prophecy foretold. In exchange, Callus and I would marry, uniting the silver and sapphire dragon lines in one house. Our children would carry the blood of both North and South, both dragon houses, symbolizing the permanent joining of what had been divided. And most importantly, Aldrich would spend his remaining time undoing the damage he had caused. He would pardon those persecuted for dragon blood. He would rebuild the trust his fear had destroyed. He would try, however imperfectly, to atone. It was not perfect. Nothing involving humans ever is, but it was a beginning. The formal announcement came on the 4th day. In the great hall of the southern castle, before nobles from both kingdoms, Aldrich stood and spoke words that would change the course of history. "I have made many mistakes in my long life," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "I have ruled through fear when I should have led with wisdom. I have destroyed when I should have built. And worst of all, I drove away my own daughter because I was too afraid to see the gift she carried." He turned to me where I stood beside Callus. "Seraphina is my granddaughter," he continued, "the child of my beloved Isadora, who I wronged in ways I can never fully repair. She carries the marks of the moon blessed, the blood of 2 dragon houses, and a courage I can only envy. Today I name her my heir. When I pass from this world, she will inherit the southern throne." Murmurs filled the hall. Shock, disbelief, some anger from those who had hoped to claim the throne themselves. But Aldrich was not finished. "Furthermore, she will wed King Callus of the North, uniting our kingdoms in peace. What my fear divided, their union will restore. The prophecy I spent my life fighting will be fulfilled, but not through violence, through love, through choice, through the courage to change." He removed his crown, a heavy thing of gold and garnets, and held it in his weathered hands. "This is my legacy," he said quietly. "Let it be measured not by the years I ruled, but by the peace I helped create at the end." The hall erupted then. Some cheered, others protested. Guards had to restrain a few nobles who seemed ready to draw swords, but the announcement was made. The course was set. That evening, Callus found me standing alone on a balcony overlooking the city. I had fled the celebration inside, overwhelmed by the sudden change in my circumstances. Less than 2 months ago, I had been a prisoner in a tower. Now I was a princess, an heir, a future queen, and apparently a bride. "Having second thoughts?" Callus asked, joining me at the railing. "About which part?" I asked. "The throne? The marriage? The responsibility for 2 entire kingdoms? Any of it, all of it." I was quiet for a moment, watching the sun set over the southern capital. The same city I had observed from my tower window for 10 years, but from a completely different perspective now. "When I was locked away," I said slowly, "I used to dream about freedom, about being able to walk where I wanted, speak to whom I chose, live without fear. But I never imagined this. I never thought about what I would actually do with freedom if I had it. And now that you do? Now I find myself wanting to use it for something that matters, something larger than just my own happiness." Callus moved closer, his shoulder almost touching mine. "For what it is worth," he said, "I think you will make an extraordinary queen." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "I do not even know how to be a person, let alone a queen." "You know more than you think," he said. "You survived 10 years of isolation without losing your kindness. You risked everything to save Alara, a child you did not know. You faced Aldrich with truth instead of violence. Those are not the actions of someone who does not know how to be a person. Those are the actions of a leader." His words settled something in me. The panic that had been building in my chest eased slightly. "And the marriage?" I asked quietly. "How do you feel about that?" He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful. "I proposed it to Aldrich as a political necessity, a way to seal the alliance and give legitimacy to the union of kingdoms. But I want you to know that you have a choice in this. If you do not wish to marry me, we can find another way." I turned to face him. In the dying light, his white hair seemed to glow. His blue eyes held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Do you want to marry me?" I asked. The question hung between us. I saw conflict flash across his face, king and man wrestling with duty and desire. "Yes," he said finally. "Not because of politics or prophecy or duty, but because when I am with you, I feel less alone. Because your courage humbles me. Because the thought of facing the future without you feels wrong in a way I cannot explain." He reached up, his fingers brushing my cheek where the silver marks began, just as he had done weeks ago in my tower room at Icevale. "I am not asking you to love me," he continued. "I know that takes time, if it happens at all. But I am asking you to be my partner, my equal, to stand beside me as we try to build something better than what came before." I thought about his words, about partnership and equality and building something better, about the way my heart raced when he was near, the way I felt safer with him beside me, the way his respect made me feel valuable in a way nothing else ever had. "I do not know if I love you," I said honestly. "I do not know what love feels like, having never really known it beyond my mother's fading memory. But I know that I trust you. I know that when I imagine the future, you are in it. And I know that if I am going to face the impossible task of uniting two kingdoms, I want you beside me." "Is that a yes?" he asked, a smile tugging at his lips. "It is a yes," I confirmed. He pulled me into his arms then, holding me close as the last light faded from the sky. I felt the steady beat of his heart, the strength in his embrace, the warmth that pushed back the evening chill. We stood like that for a long time, two people who had found each other through impossible circumstances, now bound by choice as much as by duty. The wedding took place 1 month later at the first full moon of spring. By tradition, it should have been held in either the northern or southern capital, but we chose neutral ground instead, a field on the border where north met south, where 1,000 years ago the kingdoms had first divided. Workers spent weeks preparing the site. They built a platform of white stone, erected pavilions for guests, planted gardens that bloomed impossibly early through some magic Kaelin worked. On the day itself, the field was transformed into something from a dream. I dressed in a gown that combined northern and southern styles. The bodice was southern silk, deep blue like midnight, fitted close to emphasize my figure. The skirt was northern wool, flowing and practical, embroidered with silver thread that traced patterns matching the marks on my face. A cloak of white fur completed the ensemble, held at my throat by a clasp shaped like 2 dragons intertwined. Alara helped me prepare, her small fingers deft with pins and clasps. She wore her own new dress, looking so grown up I barely recognized the fevered child I had carried through the wilderness. "You look like a queen," she said, her eyes wide. "I am terrified," I admitted. "That means it matters," she said wisely. "If you were not scared, it would not be important." "When did you become so wise?" I asked, smiling despite my nerves. "Callus says I have been wise since birth. I just keep getting better at it." I laughed and hugged her close. "Thank you, little one, for everything." "For what?" "For reminding me what family feels like." The ceremony itself was witnessed by thousands. Nobles from both kingdoms, commoners who had traveled for days, even representatives from the other 5 kingdoms come to see this historic union. I walked down an aisle of white stones while musicians played a melody that blended northern and southern traditions. At the end of that aisle waited Callus. He wore armor of silver polished to mirror brightness, a white cloak flowing from his shoulders. His white hair was bound back, revealing the strong lines of his face. When our eyes met, he smiled, and some of my terror eased. We stood before Kaelin, who performed the ceremony. The words were ancient, speaking of bonds that transcended politics and duty, of partnerships built on respect and choice, of 2 becoming one while remaining themselves. When it came time for vows, Callus took my hands in his. "I vow to stand beside you as an equal," he said, "to honor your wisdom and respect your choices, to protect not just your life, but your freedom, to build with you a kingdom where no one must hide who they are. This I swear by the dragons of old and the hope of tomorrow." My turn. My voice shook at first but grew stronger as I spoke. "I vow to share your burdens and celebrate your victories, to offer my strength when you are weak and accept your strength when I falter, to never let fear guide our choices, to help build a kingdom worthy of the sacrifices made to create it. This I swear by my mother's memory and the future we will shape together." Kaelin bound our hands together with a silver cord. "By the power vested in me by the old magic and the new law, I pronounce you joined. 2 lines united. 2 kingdoms made one. 2 hearts beating together." Callus pulled me close and kissed me. It was not our first kiss, but it was different, deeper, full of promise and possibility. The crowd erupted in cheers that seemed to shake the very ground. We turned to face them, hands still bound, and I saw it. Thousands of faces, north and south together, celebrating not just a wedding, but a new beginning. For the first time in 1,000 years, the kingdoms were whole. The celebration lasted 3 days. There was food enough to feed an army, music and dancing from sunset to dawn. Nobles who had been enemies weeks before now drank together and laughed. It was not perfect peace. Old grudges do not die so easily. But it was a start. On the 4th day, we returned to Icevale Castle, to home. Callus and I now shared chambers in the highest tower, rooms with windows looking out over the mountains in one direction and the forests in another. Symbolically positioned between north and south, life fell into a new rhythm. Days were filled with the work of governance, learning to administer 2 kingdoms instead of 1, settling disputes, making laws, building the infrastructure of a unified nation. It was exhausting work, but important. Callus and I learned to lead together. Our styles were different. He was direct and decisive, a warrior who saw problems as enemies to defeat. I was more subtle, preferring to understand the roots of conflicts before acting. But we balanced each other. Where he saw only the immediate tactical need, I saw the long-term consequences. Where I hesitated in analysis, he pushed for action. We did not always agree. Sometimes we argued, our voices raised in the privacy of our chambers. But we learned to argue productively, to see disagreement as a tool for finding better solutions, rather than a battle to win. And slowly, carefully, we learned each other in other ways too. The marriage had been political at first, a necessity. But proximity and partnership bred something deeper. I learned that he snored softly when exhausted from long days, that he had a weakness for honey cakes from the kitchen, that he sometimes woke in the night from dreams of his parents' deaths. He learned that I could not sleep without a candle burning, a remnant of my tower days, that I loved morning training sessions more than formal dinners, that I still sometimes felt like an imposter playing at being royalty. We learned to comfort each other, to offer strength when the weight of 2 kingdoms threatened to crush us, to find moments of peace in the chaos of building a nation. The first real crisis came 5 months after the wedding. A group of southern nobles, unhappy with the unified rule, attempted a rebellion. They gathered forces in secret, planning to overthrow Aldrich and seize the southern throne before the old king died and I could inherit. We discovered the plot through our spies. Callus wanted to crush them immediately with military force. "We send dragons," he said in council. "Make an example of the leaders. Show that rebellion will not be tolerated." But I disagreed. If we respond with violence, we prove them right. We show that northern rule means oppression. We need a different approach. "What approach?" he demanded. "They are plotting treason." "We give them what they want," I said. "A voice in how they are governed." The council erupted in argument, but I stood firm. We offered the rebellious nobles a compromise. They could keep their lands and titles if they swore loyalty. In exchange, we would create a council of southern nobles with real power to advise on laws affecting their regions. It was a risk. Some saw it as weakness, but most saw it as wisdom. The rebellion dissolved. The nobles, given real power instead of empty promises, became some of our strongest supporters. Callus admitted afterward that my solution was better than his. "You saw what I missed," he said, "that people do not just want to be ruled, they want to be heard. And you gave me the courage to propose it," I replied, "knowing you would support me even if I was wrong." He pulled me close, kissed the top of my head. "We make a good team, Queen Seraphina." I smiled at the title. It still felt strange, but less so each day. The true test came in the 7th month. Reports reached us of strange activity in the far southern mountains. Earthquakes, forests burning without cause, livestock vanishing, and sightings of something massive flying in the night. Kaelin confirmed our fears. Nethrax, an ancient dragon who had been imprisoned 2 centuries ago for trying to enslave humanity. Somehow he was breaking free. "The old magic that bound him is failing," Kaelin explained. "Your union, the joining of 2 dragon bloodlines, created a surge of power that weakened ancient spells. It was unintended, but the damage is done." "How powerful is he?" I asked. "Stronger than any dragon alive today," Kaelin said grimly, "including His Majesty. And he will not be alone. There are others of his kind who share his hatred of humans. They will flock to him." "How many?" Callus asked. "Unknown, but more than we can fight with force alone." "Then we need another solution," I said. "We need to talk to him. Talk to a dragon who enslaved thousands? Drevin scoffed. "He will kill you on sight." "Perhaps," I agreed. "But what choice do we have? If we fight, people will die. Thousands of people, maybe millions. We have to try diplomacy first." Callus looked at me for a long moment. I saw the conflict in his face, the instinct to protect me warring with his respect for my judgment. "If we do this, we do it together," he said finally. "You do not face Nethrax alone." "I would not want to," I replied. We spent 2 weeks preparing, studying ancient texts about Nethrax, learning what we could about his motivations, his weaknesses, his beliefs. We discovered that he had not always been a tyrant. Once, long ago, he had been a protector. But something had changed him, twisted him into the monster he became. Kaelin found the key in an old text. Nethrax had lost his mate. She had been killed by human hunters who feared dragons. In his grief and rage, he had decided all humans must pay, must serve, must suffer as he had suffered. He is trapped in pain, I realized. We need to show him that not all humans are like those who killed his mate, that we can be more. "How do you show that to a creature who has lived for centuries in hatred?" Callus asked. "By proving it," I said, "by risking everything to talk to him, by offering mercy when he expects violence." It was decided. We would go to the southern mountains, Callus in his dragon form, me riding with him. We would seek Nethrax out and try to negotiate. Alara begged to come with us. Now 9 years old and fierce as her brother, she had been training to control her own dragon form. But we refused. The risk was too great. "If we do not return," I told her, "you will be queen. You will carry on what we started." "You will return," she said with absolute certainty. "You always do." We left at dawn on a cold morning. Callus transformed into his silver dragon form, magnificent and terrifying. I climbed onto his back, feeling the now familiar warmth of his scales. We had flown together many times over the months, but never like this, never knowing we might not come back. As we rose into the air, I looked back at Icevale Castle, at the life we had built there, the home we had created, and I promised myself we would see it again. The flight south took most of the day. We followed reports of destruction, a trail that led deep into the mountains where few humans lived. The land grew more desolate as we traveled. Trees stood blackened and dead. The ground was cracked and scorched. Then we felt it, a presence that pressed against our minds like a physical weight, ancient, powerful, angry. "He knows we are here," Callus said, his dragon voice resonating through my bones. "Then let us not keep him waiting," I replied. We landed in a massive crater that had once been a mountain peak. The stone was still hot, radiating heat that made the air shimmer, and there, coiled in the center of that devastation, waited Nethrax. He was enormous, 3 times the size of Callus. His scales were black as midnight, shot through with veins of molten red like cooling lava. His eyes burned with fire and fury. Power radiated from him in waves that made my marks burn. This was a creature that could level cities, that had leveled cities, and we were going to try to talk to him. Callus transformed back to human form, standing between me and the ancient dragon. I moved to his side despite the danger. "Nethrax!" Callus called out. "We come under flag of truce to speak with you." The dragon laughed, a sound like mountains crumbling. "Truce? You are King Callus, the one who sides with humans, who married one of the marked, who seeks to keep my kind chained." "We seek peace," I said, stepping forward. "Not chains." Nethrax focused on me, and I felt the weight of his gaze like a physical force. His eyes narrowed. "You are the prophesied one, the moon-blessed who united the kingdoms. Did you think your actions have no consequences?" "I expected consequences," I said, "but I hoped they would be peace, not war." "You know nothing of war, girl. I have seen cities burn. I have watched my mate die in agony from human arrows. I have lived centuries in imprisonment because I dared to demand justice, and now you come to me speaking of peace?" "I understand your pain," I said quietly. "You understand nothing," he roared, and the force of it nearly knocked me down. But I stood firm. "You are right. I cannot understand losing a mate. I cannot imagine centuries of imprisonment. But I know what it is to be caged, to be hated for what you are, to watch the world through bars and know you will never be free." Nethrax hesitated. I felt his attention sharpen on me. "I spent 10 years in a tower," I continued, "locked away because I bore marks like these, called cursed, called shameful, told I was unworthy of love or freedom. For 10 years I believed them, and then someone saw past the marks to the person beneath. Someone chose to free me. Someone chose mercy over fear. "I am not that someone," Nethrax growled. "I am vengeance. I am justice for all dragons who suffered under human cruelty." "No," I said. "You are pain. You are grief. You are a creature who loved deeply and lost everything. And instead of healing, you have spent centuries making others feel your suffering. Does it help? Does making humans suffer bring her back?" Silence fell over the crater. Nethrax stared at me with eyes that had seen millennia. "Nothing brings her back," he said finally, his voice hollow. "No," I agreed. "Nothing can. But you can choose what her death means. Does it mean endless cycles of revenge? Or does it mean working to build a world where no one else, human or dragon, has to lose their mate to fear and hatred?" "You asked me to forgive," he said, "to forget." "I ask you to live," I corrected. "Truly live, not just exist in rage. To see that humans have changed, that we are trying to be better." "Some of us never change," Nethrax said bitterly. "Some of you are still hunters, still killers." "Yes," I admitted. "And some dragons are still tyrants, still enslavers. Evil exists on both sides, but so does good. So does the capacity for growth, for change, for choosing differently. And if I refuse, if I choose to burn your kingdoms and everything you have built, then you prove that you are exactly what the humans who killed your mate thought you were. A monster incapable of reason or mercy, and all the dragons who follow you will be judged by your actions." Callus stepped forward then, his voice adding weight to mine. "I am dragonborn," he said. "I carry the old blood. And I tell you that what Seraphina offers is not weakness. It is the only path forward. Fight us, and even if you win, you doom all dragons. Because humans outnumber us 1,000 to 1. They will hunt us to extinction out of fear. But work with us, build with us, and we can create something neither species could achieve alone." Nethrax was quiet for a long time. His massive form shifted, scales scraping against stone. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Less rage, more weariness. "I am so tired," he said. "Tired of fighting, tired of hating, but I do not know how to stop." I moved closer, ignoring Callus's attempt to hold me back. I walked right up to Nethrax's enormous head, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his scales. "Then let us help you," I said softly. "Let us show you that there is another way. You do not have to trust all humans, but trust me, trust Callus. Give us a chance to prove that the world can be different than what you have known." "Why should I trust you?" "Because I am offering you what I would want if our positions were reversed. A chance, hope, the possibility of healing instead of endless pain." Nethrax lowered his head until his massive eye was level with mine. In that eye, I saw not a monster, but a being drowning in grief, a creature who had loved and lost and never recovered. I reached out slowly and placed my hand on his scales. They were hot, almost burning, but I did not pull away. "You do not have to be alone anymore," I whispered. "We have all been alone too long. Let us try together." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Nethrax closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the fire had dimmed. What remained was just tiredness. "One chance," he said. "I will take your truce. But if humans betray this trust, if they prove they have not changed, I will rain fire on everything you love. Do you accept those terms?" "I accept," I said without hesitation. We stayed with Nethrax for 3 days, talking, sharing stories. Callus spoke of the North, of trying to rule justly in a world that often rewarded cruelty. I spoke of my time in the tower, of finding freedom and choosing to use it to help others. And Nethrax spoke of his mate, of their centuries together, of the day she died, and how a part of him died with her. The grief in his voice was a physical thing, heavy enough to crush. On the 3rd day, he agreed to return with us, to meet with the councils, to try to find a place in this new world we were building. Other dragons had gathered during our talks, 12 of them, drawn by Nethrax's presence. Some were angry, ready to follow him into war, but when they saw him speaking with us, saw him choosing peace, they hesitated. We returned to Ice Vale not as conquerors, but as ambassadors. 13 dragons flying in formation with Callus. It was a sight that shook the kingdom. People poured into the streets, uncertain whether to cheer or flee. But when we landed in the great courtyard, and I dismounted from Callus's back unharmed, when Nethrax transformed into an ancient man with tired eyes and spoke of peace, fear began to shift into hope. The integration was not easy. Many humans still feared dragons. Many dragons still resented humans. But we worked at it, created laws protecting both, built spaces where they could meet and trade and learn from each other. It took years. It is still taking years, but it is happening. Aldrich died in his sleep 2 years after our wedding. He went peacefully, surrounded by advisors who had become friends. In his final days, he asked to see me. I sat by his bedside and held his hand. "Thank you," he whispered, "for giving me a chance to be better than I was." "Thank you for taking it," I replied. He smiled. "Tell her I'm sorry. When you see her again, tell Isadora I am sorry." "I will," I promised. He closed his eyes and did not open them again. We buried him with honor, and I inherited the southern throne as planned. The union of kingdoms was complete. 5 years after that day in the crater with Nethrax, I stood before a mirror in my chambers preparing for another ceremony, the winter coronation, a celebration marking 7 years since the kingdoms had united. I was 23 years old now. The girl from the tower felt like a lifetime ago, though the constellation patterns remained etched on my skin. I touched them in the mirror, these celestial markings that had once been my shame and were now my pride. Alara burst in, now 15 and radiant. She had mastered her dragon form and served as our ambassador to the other kingdoms. Behind her came 2 smaller figures, my children. Aldrich, named for his great-grandfather, was 5 years old with his father's white hair and my blue eyes. And Isadora, named for my mother, was 3 with black hair and marks of silver and blue that proclaimed her heritage. "Mama, you look beautiful," Isadora said, reaching for me. I lifted her into my arms, this perfect child who would never know what it was to be hidden, who would grow up proud of her marks, confident in her power. "Are you ready?" Alara asked. "Everyone is waiting." I looked around the room, at Alara, fierce and loyal, at my children, innocent and hopeful, at Callus, who had entered quietly and now watched us all with eyes full of love. "I am ready," I said. We walked together through the castle corridors, my family surrounding me. Outside in the great courtyard, thousands had gathered, humans and dragons side by side, northern and southern together, 7 kingdoms united in peace. I stepped onto the platform that had been built for the ceremony. Kalen stood there, older now, but still strong. In his hands he held 2 crowns, one of silver, one of gold. "Queen Seraphina," he said, his voice carrying to every corner. 7 years ago, 2 kingdoms became one. Tonight we celebrate not just that union, but what has grown from it. Peace between species, justice for those long persecuted, hope for a future brighter than our past. He placed the silver crown on my head, its weight familiar now. "You are Queen of the United Kingdoms, defender of all peoples, dragon and human alike. How do you pledge to rule?" I stepped forward, looking out at the sea of faces, at people I had fought for, people I had nearly died for, people I would die for still if needed. "I pledge to rule with wisdom tempered by mercy," I said, my voice strong and clear. "To remember that power is a responsibility, not a right. To never forget the girl in the tower who was shown kindness when she expected none. To build a kingdom where everyone can be free, where no one must hide who they are, where marks are honored and differences celebrated." I raised my hand, letting the moonlit tracery catch the light. "I was called cursed," I said. "But the curse was always a blessing. I just needed someone brave enough to see it. Now I ask you to be that brave, to see the blessings in every curse, to find the light in every darkness, to choose hope over fear, always." The crowd erupted in cheers, but I had one more thing to do. I turned to Callus and held out my hand. He took it, stepping forward to stand beside me. Together we transformed, his form shifting to silver dragon, mine to sapphire blue with silver constellation marks. We leaped into the air together, wings beating in unison. Below us, other dragons joined. Nethrax's black scales beside Alara's white, dozens more, all the dragons who had chosen peace over war. We circled the castle, a flight of dragons united. On the ground, people cheered and pointed. Children watched with wonder instead of fear, and I realized this was what my mother had died hoping for, this moment, this possibility. We landed back on the platform and transformed to human form. Callus wrapped his cloak around my shoulders. Our children ran to us laughing and unafraid. "Not a bad life," he said softly, "for a girl from a tower and a king who never expected to marry." "Not bad at all," I agreed, though it is still strange sometimes. I still wake up expecting to be back in that small room, alone. "You will never be alone again," he promised. "I will make sure of it." The celebration continued long into the night, music and dancing and feasting, northerners and southerners, humans and dragons, all together. It was not perfect. Nothing ever is. There were still conflicts, still problems to solve, still people who resisted change. But we had proven it was possible, that old wounds could heal, that ancient enemies could become friends, that prophecies of doom could be transformed into promises of hope. As the moon rose full and bright, I stood with my family on the highest tower, the same tower where I had lived in exile. But how different it looked now. Not a prison, but a home. Not a place of shame, but a place of pride. "Mama," Aldrich asked, tugging my hand, "tell us the story about the girl in the tower." "It is late," I said. "Time for sleep." "Please," Isadora joined her brother's plea. "We want to hear." So I settled down with them, Callus beside me, Alara listening too, and I told them the story, not as a fairy tale, but as truth. About fear and courage, about being different and finding strength in that difference, about learning that the things we think make us weak can become our greatest power. When I finished, my children were asleep against me. Alara had left to attend to her duties. Only Callus remained awake. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked quietly. "The weight of it all?" I thought about the question, about the burden of two kingdoms, the responsibility of millions of lives, the constant pressure of being a symbol. "No," I said finally. "I spent 10 years wishing for purpose, for meaning, for a life that mattered. This is everything I wished for and more. It is hard, yes, but it is worth it." He kissed my forehead. "You amaze me, you know that?" I smiled. "You might have mentioned it once or twice." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars. The same stars I had watched from this tower when I was 16 and desperate for escape. They had not changed. But I had. The world had. And somewhere in the distance, a dragon roared. Not in anger or challenge, but in joy, a sound of freedom and possibility. I thought of all the moon-blessed who had come to the kingdom over the years, the ones who had hidden their marks their whole lives, who had believed they were cursed. We were building a home for them now, a place where they could be themselves without fear. I thought of my mother, who had died to give me a chance at freedom, who had fought impossible odds to protect her child. I hoped she knew, wherever she was, that her sacrifice had not been wasted. And I thought about prophecy, about how it had terrified a king into cruelty, how it had shaped my entire existence, how it had nearly destroyed everything. But in the end, prophecy was just possibility. It was humans who chose how to fulfill it. We could have chosen war and death. Instead, we chose unity and life. The girl who was told she was cursed had become a queen. The kingdoms that were divided had become one. The dragon who sought vengeance had found peace. The prophecy was fulfilled, but not through destruction, through courage, through choice, through the willingness to see blessings where others saw only curses. As dawn began to paint the sky in shades of gold and pink, I stood and gathered my sleeping children. Callus helped me, and together we carried them to their beds. Then we returned to our own chambers, to our own bed, to hold each other as the world woke around us. "I am happy," I realized with surprise. After everything, despite everything, I am genuinely happy. And that, more than any crown or kingdom or prophecy, felt like the greatest magic of all. The story of the girl in the tower had become the story of a queen. But more than that, it had become proof that we are not defined by the circumstances of our birth or the fears of others. We are defined by our choices, by our courage, by our willingness to believe that tomorrow can be better than today. I had been called cursed, but I chose to be blessed. And in choosing, I changed everything.